Good morning to all, and welcome to the opening plenary for AFT's 1493 Teach-In to address systemic inequities, social justice unionism in practice, from part-time parity to anti-oppression organizing. There is an accessible transcript of the audio available via the otter.ai link in our chat. Please welcome Professor Kolo Wamba, a longtime adjunct faculty member and newly hired full-time professor at Skyline College, who will share a welcome message to set the theme and tone for our day of activism and organizing. Welcome, Kolo.
Thank you, Tim. Okay, let me see if I can share my screen here. Okay. So can everyone see my slide? It has my picture and my name?
Yes.
All right, perfect. Okay, so all right. So to all my esteemed colleagues and our honorable students, good afternoon. It is my utmost honor and pleasure to be with you all today, even though it's only virtually. Welcome to Skyline's first ever virtual teach-in, which we are calling Social Justice Unionism in Practice, from part-time pay parity to anti-oppression organizing. And a very special welcome to our illustrious keynote speakers, our very own Professor Sarah Harmon and SFSU's Professor Gustavo Lopez. Like all of you in the audience, I'm very eager to receive the lesson that they and the rest of our speakers and panelists today will have for us. So by way of welcome and to set the stage for many of the themes that we will be touching on in our teach-in today, I would like to share with you part of my story. So as Tim said, my name is Kolo Wamba and I teach physics here. Back in May, my physics colleagues and I had the unique experience of witnessing in real time and appreciating the physics of the first successful transportation of a human crew to the International Space Station by SpaceX, which is billionaire Elon Musk's private space transportation company. It was certainly an impressive achievement, and it came as a wonderful STEM learning opportunity for many of our students. But amid all the fanfare, there were some things going down that were just not as happy. The very day of the SpaceX launch, there were massive street protests in over 30 US cities over the state-sponsored public murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and countless other unarmed American civilians at the hands of police. All over the country, demonstrators risked exposure to COVID, whose pandemic we were still in the middle of, only to be met with even more of the very same racist police violence they were protesting in the first place. But as I've said before, the protests themselves were and are so much more than a justifiable reaction to violent and inequitable policing. They really are protests against inequity itself. So much so that it almost seemed fitting that the very day that predatory capitalist Elon Musk was arrogantly congratulating himself for bringing NASA astronauts to space was the same day that public frustrations at the systems of inequity to which Elon Musk owes his fabulous wealth in the first place were boiling over. And so I think, there we go. So, right, so here's the rocket, and same day we have this, right? Happening at the same time in the same country. So the protests highlighted a national crisis that is not new. It is the triple crisis of white supremacy, patriarchy, and predatory capitalism that began centuries ago with the founding of this country. And white supremacy, patriarchy, and predatory capitalism, these intersecting systems of inequity, have not gone away. They've simply been rebranded. And COVID-19, the economic crisis it has triggered, and the racist police brutality crisis are all but a few of its latest manifestations. Okay. And as much of a crisis as COVID-19 is, it is really only a side effect of the much bigger problem of global climate change, whose origins and perpetuation can be traced right back to the very same intersecting systems of inequity that I just mentioned. At the end of the summer, I transitioned to full-time status. and this semester marks my first as a full-time physics instructor at Skyline. While my going full-time is certainly something to be celebrated, it has been for me a bit of a hollow victory. The COVID crisis is still very much with us, and it has meant that my big debut as a full-timer is having to be online. And as the semester began, I was, and as I still am, grieving for my lost father, who died suddenly during the summer and whose burial took place barely a month ago. And then there's the fact that to even secure this position in the first place, I was forced to help in a way to perpetuate the deeply inequitable two-tiered system of faculty labor, which pitted me against colleagues whom I deeply respect and admire, in order to compete with them in an unhealthy way for a job whose scarcity is artificial anyhow. It really doesn't have to be this way, and I, like many of my colleagues, believe that we can do much better. The struggle against the systems of inequity and the and the versions of them that persist on this campus and in our district is really the struggle that brings us together today. We are in the middle of a global pandemic, and somehow our district can't guarantee meaningful health coverage to all of its employees. I have to reiterate this point. My esteemed adjunct colleagues who I remind you actually provide a solid majority of the instruction here, do not receive a meaningful health benefit from the district. When you consider that this is happening during a global pandemic, the likes of which we haven't seen in over 100 years, our district goes from looking like they're merely driving a hard bargain to actually looking downright homicidal. I say again, we have to do better. On opening day, we were treated to plenty of eloquent rhetoric about anti-racism and anti-inequity, to which I would respond that I, and a disproportionate number of my esteemed colleagues, already are victims of systemic racism and of patriarchy. And I think everyone would agree that it is simply unacceptable for one's workplace to be complicit in one's oppression. Does the district's commitment to anti-racism include committing to a fair contract for our faculty, one with parity in pay and a meaningful health benefit for adjuncts, which should go without saying is the absolute bare minimum to be expected during a global pandemic? We were also treated on opening day to a beautiful acknowledgement of the Muwekma Ohlone people whose land is now partially occupied by our campus. In response, I would respectfully ask, does this acknowledgement of the indigenous populations, the occupation of whose lands we all benefit from, include ensuring that our indigenous students, faculty, and classified staff are fully receiving everything they need to flourish and be successful? And what will be done to help protect our indigenous communities and other communities of color who are disproportionately affected not only by the COVID pandemic, but also by the latest round of record heat waves and the massive wildfires that come with them? So here's this wonderful map of all the stuff going down. Like COVID, the heat waves and wildfires are really just different side effects of the global climate crisis. And because our indigenous and other communities of color are disproportionately experiencing housing and economic insecurity, the heat and fires, like COVID, represent additional indirect ways that we continue to experience oppression. And in yet another stunning illustration of the intersection of patriarchy, white supremacy, and predatory capitalism, it turns out that our state has been trying to fight the wildfires by using what is essentially slave labor, disproportionately provided by female prison inmates of color. It even gets worse. Many of our prisons are now ravaged by COVID, and this has meant that our firefighting corps is not at full strength, and so the fires are taking much longer to contain. And thus we see just how toxic the inequity in our society has become, and just how it is ultimately damaging really to everybody. Some of my own colleagues and students have reported losing family members to COVID, and others have been forced to evacuate their neighborhoods. But our district's response to the wildfires, which was to place a short moratorium on in-person classes, and which was arguably the right call, does not go far enough. It fails to account for those who are evacuating and who are experiencing heat wave related power outages, or both, and who wouldn't have been able to be online anyhow as a result. Once again, I say we can do better. In our teach-in today, we will be highlighting our fight, the struggle against inequity in all its forms. And if anyone still believes that they can remain neutral on this issue, I would ask them to consider the words of Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who says, "If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor." Or how about Zora Neale Hurston? She says, "If you are silent about your pain, they'll kill you and say you enjoyed it." Indeed, oh, whoops. Sorry. Indeed, today and after today, let us pledge not to be silent about our or anyone's pain. We can acknowledge our shared burdens and our shared humanity, and we can fight back. Once again, welcome everyone. Let us make this teach-in a historic success. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Kolo. I will now provide some brief additional context for our teach-in by reading statements of solidarity with other civil rights actions ongoing around our country. These statements have been voted and approved upon by our union's executive committee. Lately, we have been reminded once more of the racist violence that continues in our nation. With the shooting of Jacob Blake in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and the newly released video of the suffocation of Daniel Prude in New York, the racist brutality against African Americans is once again on full display. We stand in solidarity with the victims of these hate crimes, and we reaffirm our commitment to fighting against racism on our campuses and within our communities. In line with this sentiment, the Executive Committee of AFT 1493 has voted to support this statement of solidarity from the labor movement with the work stoppages undertaken by professional athletes to support the movement for Black lives. As the statement reads in part, they remind us that when we strike to withhold our labor, we have the power to bring an unjust status quo to a grinding halt. The status quo of police killing Black people, of armed white nationalists killing demonstrators, of millions sick and increasingly desperate is clearly unjust, and it cannot continue. As unions representing millions of workers across the country, we stand in solidarity with our comrades on the courts, on the fields, and in the streets. Solidarity for Black lives. Scholar strike. The AFT 1493 Teaching for Social Justice is also dedicated in solidarity with the National Scholar Strike movement. Created seemingly overnight by grassroots educators at colleges and universities around the country, Scholar Strike asked professors to withhold their labor in support of Black Lives Matter and against state violence against communities of color. An excerpt from their statement reads, "We believe that it's of crucial importance for those of us in higher education to take a stand in solidarity with our students and the communities we serve. We also see the need to affirm protesters, workers for social justice, and activists who are crucial parts of making our communities better places. We believe that it is long past time for us to make a collective stand against police violence, particularly against communities of color in the United States. We will refrain from teaching and all administrative duties, and we will use this time as a public teach-in about police brutality and violence in our communities from both historical and contemporary perspectives." CFT votes. Unions have a long history of encouraging active participation in our democracy, and AFT 1493 would like to continue this tradition by inviting all of us present here today to be sure that you are registered to vote. A link has been provided in the chat to check your registration status in the state of California. Additionally, our statewide union, the CFT, has produced an excellent interactive voter guide, which we encourage you to view. A link has been provided in the chat to the CFT voter guide. By inputting your address on this voter guide, you will get the opportunity to view a full slate of union-endorsed candidates and propositions tailored specifically to your voting district. I would now like to invite our keynote speaker for this plenary, Gustavo Lopez, former South San Francisco high school teacher and currently an organizer with Change South San Francisco and faculty coordinator at San Francisco State's Metro Academy. Please welcome Gustavo Lopez.
Hello, I'm gonna share my my screen real quick just to show some pictures. Can everybody see my pictures?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah, looking great.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. So let me get my things in order right here. But okay. So I want to acknowledge that I'm speaking from San Bruno, California, what used to be Ohlone and Ramaytush land before English was spoken, before Spanish was spoken. This is their land. And by the looks of it, we don't deserve to occupy the land. We must give the land back to those who know how to take care of it and bring balance to a country that's right now out of balance. So I really appreciate those words, giving homage to, giving knowledge and to occupied land. I want to thank all the organizers who put this together, the AFT, the community organizers, and the workers speaking later today. I was asked to share my experience with community organizing in the peninsula. So I want to share a story of how I got involved in social justice work in my town of South City. So once again, my name is Gustavo Lopez. I'm a Chicano from South San Francisco. I studied at City College of San Francisco, and I was a transfer student at San Francisco State University, where I majored in Raza Studies and Political Science. I got my teaching credential and master's from USF in the Urban Education and Social Justice program. I'm also a member of the CFA Union from San Francisco State, from the San Francisco State chapter, where I currently work with the Metro College Academy program. I say all of that not to flex, but to acknowledge that I struggled heavily and beat so many odds to rob higher education and bring it back to my hood. And I do say rob because these institutions still do not belong to us yet. There are still so many gaps and not enough people of color that look like me that are in positions of power to change the conditions on campus for working class students and students of color. But I say yet because we will still continue to organize until we do have that type of power. I'm a product of the Chicano and Chicana movement and union organizing. I moved to South City when I was 12 years old, uprooted from San Francisco and later San Bruno, and eventually laid my roots in South City. I'm a son to Marcella and a brother to Jonathan. My family were my foundation and taught me how to survive when I was alone. I recall my mother had to leave my brother and me by ourselves on many occasions to clean houses, to do side jobs like deliver phone books door to door, sell water filters, whatever to put food on the table. She eventually became a Muni bus driver, driving the metro trains, cable cars, and eventually settled with driving the 14 mission route for over 30 years, where she has recently in the last few years retired. My brother was a teenage father at 17, so we all had to survive at a very early age. Ironically, it was my mother who took me to my first protest, where she worked for a short while for a small organization called Income Rights, fighting for low-income families in San Francisco. I was again introduced to community organizing in middle school while I attended Altaloma Middle School in 1997. I was in the 7th grade and I was only 13 years old. If it wasn't for community organizing, I don't think I would actually be talking to you guys right now. At that time, I met my mentors, Sergio Arroyo and Prishni Murillo, in Sergio's garage in Daly City, where he would host meetings for youth for a group called Voices of Struggle, or what we call VOS. I believe at the time Sergio was saving money to attend SFSU, and Prishni was a student at UC Berkeley. They became my role models and treated me like their family. They took me to conferences and educated me on my true indigenous history. They showed me how to resist and fight the system. It was there I became part of VOS. It was a grassroots Chicano organization with mostly Mexican and Central American high school students and college students. I joined the movement in the middle of one of the biggest youth-led walkouts in the Bay Area at the time. There is some documentation of this work in Elizabeth Betita Martinez's book called De Colores Means All of Us. As a youth, she was one of the first Chicana feminists that I met that shared her experiences of the Chicano movement of the 60s and 70s. And her book, 500 Years of Chicano History, was the first book that opened my mind to the realities that this country had been selling lies to me about my history. And it was the first book that actually acknowledged my indigenous ancestry. Sergio and Prishni would take a group of us, students from Daly City, San Bruno, and South City to West Oakland to attend what we called area-wide meetings at the union office of Unite Here Local 2850. We were planning a mostly high school walkout with Voss and co-conspirators from Pittsburgh, Frisco, Oakland, Hayward, San Jose, Daly City, South City, and Berkeley. All of the leads would meet there and break up into committees to plan a youth-led walkout that took months to organize. Over 60 youth leads and co-conspirators were attending these monthly meetings that represented hundreds of students from their hoods. We were fighting for ethnic studies and Raza studies. We were fighting against Proposition 227 that ended funding for bilingual education at the time, and Prop 209 that ended affirmative action. We were also demanding funding for schools, not jails. which is still actually a problem today, as we're still calling to defund the police and reinvest that money into social services. It was at Local 2850 that we made banners that said "Defend Land and Life." It was the union office that where I learned how to phone bank, how to do media messaging, how to do security, how to do outreach. Now that I reflect on it, it was a school of organizing, and I was an apprentice. I never felt so free, so united with youth who were Latinx, Black, and Asian. I met white allies that changed my perspective on fighting racism together. I took all these skills back to my middle school in 1997. The time came to put theory into practice, and Voss had picked the target, the brand new multi-million-dollar police station located in Concord, California. But how would we get thousands of students to Concord? Voss chose public BART trains. So a day before the walkout, I passed out walkout flyers to all my peers. The faculty found out and began to warn parents, but it was too late. We met in the back of Altaloma Middle School in South City and gathered our troops. The principal and vice principal, along with school security, tried to stop us, but we told them that we had a First Amendment right that protects our right to peacefully protest. They began to try to grab us and stand in our way, so we ran down the hill leading to Hickey Boulevard to catch a Samtrans bus leading to BART. About 30 students from Altaloma Middle School, led by me, got to Como BART station right in time to meet with Jefferson High School, Oceana, and Westmore High School students. The sight was amazing. The police were overwhelmed and could not hold off what looked like over 600 students hopping over the BART fare gates without paying. That people power was exhilarated and sticks with me even until today. Every BART stop on the way to Concord, we picked up more students from all of our chapters. The BART trains were full of Black and brown students chanting and laughing, everyone introducing themselves to each other. By the time we arrived at Concord, the police were so taken off guard. They were guarding the police station in civilian clothing. They didn't have enough time to change into their uniforms. We set up a flatbed truck in front of the multi-million-dollar police station and had our program. There was hip hop artists, rappers doing spoken words, singing. There were Black and brown speakers, and a youth program demanding an end to police brutality, an end to youth incarceration, funding for schools, and demanding ethnic studies. It was a beautiful sight to see gangs put their colors to the side, Black and brown youth demanding higher education and unity amongst everyone. We had over 3,000 youth in the streets marching and demanding justice and equity. It was that event that set me on a path for community organizing and got me into a lot of trouble. I continued to organize in high school while I attended South City High School, where my leadership and my unwillingness to follow the status quo got me expelled after my sophomore year. What did it in for me was organizing my peers to walk out and protest Prop 21, a law that criminalizes youth and changed the California law to charge youth as young as 14 as adults. The protest was successful even though I was suspended a week before for passing out flyers, but I knew how to phone back because of my work at the union. The irony of this is that after I got my teaching credential in 2014, I ended up back at South City as a teacher, teaching ethnic studies and world history. I even convinced them to let my students put up a mural that is actually my current background right now as I speak to you on one of the school's walls depicting protests and demanding ethnic studies and ending police brutality. It still says schools, not jails, right? We even did an homage to Trayvon Martin with a student holding a protest sign and Skittles falling out of his pockets. So that is a long story that tries to shed light on the historical legacy of the peninsula and how social justice work, immigrant rights work, ethnic studies work, and challenging the status quo of white supremacy that's been forced upon Black and brown youth, the illusion that we have no power, right? But we have power, we have student power, we have people power, and most of all, we have self-determination. Today, more than ever, as we encounter red skies, we still say that what many of my mentors taught us, defend land and life. 23 years later, we have a new movement called Change SSF, led by youth of color who many belong to universities across the nation, but who call South City home. They are continuing the legacy of direct action and community organizing, bringing attention to Black Lives Matters with families like Derek Gaines, who was murdered by the South San Francisco Police Department, Julio Ayala, who was also murdered by the South San Francisco Police Department, holding the SSF City Council accountable to fund people, not cops, to expand social services for marginalized communities struggling economically, and also with undocumented residents who are not seen and are invisible to those in power. We are also holding the SSF school board accountable and reminding them that it's not business as usual, that they must serve their schools and their students using equity and inclusion. Change SSF has also decided to get behind a former student from South City who will be speaking today, James Coleman, who aligns with many of Change SSF's values and policy and is running for District 4 for South City City Council. Today, we are still demanding access to higher education, living wages, housing for all, healthcare for all, and ending police impunity against Black and brown people. And I wanted to just share that story and thank you for listening to that story, but let's continue the legacy of resistance in the Bay Area. All of my relations, on Mateo. Thank you so much. I look forward to hearing from a lot of other people, but thank you for letting me share a little bit of historical light on the work that's been going on out here in South City, Daly City, in the peninsula for a very long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, historical light along with contemporary connections connected to our national social justice movement. I did leave a link in the chat for Change South San Francisco's Instagram page. I'll drop it again right now. Do highly recommend you all check this out in order to stay in touch with this powerful movement of youth and activists in our community. Okay, so thank you, Gustavo. I will now provide the link for a video message from our second featured plenary keynote speaker, Sarah Harmon. She is an adjunct faculty member at College of San Mateo. She has been a dedicated adjunct Spanish instructor for years, going above and beyond by working in the honors program, supporting her union, and even running a YouTube channel to help her students grow their Spanish language skills. Unfortunately, we do not have time to view her statement in full live at the plenary today, but I encourage everyone to copy the link for Sarah's keynote speech and to view it later on, as we don't want to get behind in our timing for the 3 concurrent breakout sessions, which are beginning shortly. So thank you again to Gustavo Lopez, Kolo Wamba, and Sarah Harmon, our speakers for the plenary. They did an amazing job representing the topics, themes, and contemporary issues that we're all here to discuss today. I would now like to invite all faculty members, classified professionals, students, and community supporters to join us for one of our 3 concurrent breakout sessions. SMCCD board members and administrators, we thank you for your support in our union's struggle against systemic inequities and look forward to working with you in the future to root out the continuing injustices within our district. The remaining events of the teach-in are closed to administrators and board members, and we respectfully ask that you now exit the plenary. Thank you. All right, I will now provide the links and descriptions for the breakout sessions. Hopefully you have already thought about which breakout session you would like to attend, but I now have the descriptions and links of each in the chat. I'll begin by reading breakout session number 1, then number 2, then number 3. Number 1 is titled Part-Time Compensation and the Two-Tier System. It is for a deeper look into the economics of part-time work and the social injustice that exists when employers attempt to uphold a 2-tier system of full-time and part-time workers. Session number 2 is for organizing in our workplaces and communities now. Meet with active organizers from Change SSF, a fast food unionizing campaign, and the CFT to learn about creating positive social change in your job, school, or neighborhood now. Session number 3 is racial and gender justice in the union, our campuses, and our communities. Hear from faculty and students from across our district about their experiences with racial and gender injustice and work directly with them to plan next steps for how the union can fight for racial and gender equality. At the conclusion of the breakout sessions, all adjunct faculty members and adjunct faculty members only will be invited to share their lived experiences and stories in a safe space for adjunct faculty only. If you are an adjunct and would like to attend that session and have not already received the link, please contact Eric Brenner, who has pasted his information in the chat. That is specifically for the adjunct only session from 2 to 3 p.m. Okay, so once again, we're now moving into concurrent breakout sessions happening from 12:35 until 2 p.m. And we would like to invite everyone to choose one of the 3 breakouts that we are offering and click the Zoom link in the chat or the link from your email that you received last night as a registered attendee. We do have a transcript available from today's plenary. Please email Marianne Koletsky, our union secretary, if you would like one. Okay, and we do see everyone heading off to the breakouts. Thank you very much.